Greetings and welcome to this video on the Empress. As you can see from the labels that I've placed on the card itself, there's an awful lot to get through in this particular Major Arcana trump, and it's all cool stuff. We've got a fair bit of alchemy going on, which was introduced a little bit in the Megas, but we have a lot more fundamentals being expressed in this card. And alchemy is quite an important theme that runs through this particular deck, so it's important to get to grips with this pretty early on. Other stuff include the influence of the moon, and also her position on the tree of life is extremely important. But it starts off really with mythology, because she represents Venus or Aphrodite, and she was the goddess of love and sexuality. So she was also a bit mischievous because she had an affair with the Roman god of war, which is Mars. So we have this light and dark, the love and war, the blending of opposites here. And as we can see, she represents Venus, the Emperor represents Mars, and she's the consort of the Emperor. The fact that she does have a mischievous side is also reflected in Crowley's summary of her in his book, the Book of Thoth. He says, in this card she is shown in her most general manifestation, and she combines the highest spiritual with the lowest material qualities. And because of its omniform presentation, the student who is dazzled by any given manifestation of the Empress may be led astray. And he finishes this particular section by saying, in no other card is it so necessary to disregard the parts, to concentrate upon the whole. So obviously what she represents is very important spiritually, but he's implying that there are distractions to her energy as well, depending on where she's manifesting. From a spiritual point of view, I've used this prism analogy before, where we have the oneness, the light of God, being refracted through the prism and manifesting in the various different colours and uniqueness of creation. And the Empress sits in the doorway between the two. So she is the doorway to the soul going back to God in its spiritual journey, or looking at the finite nature of life itself, and each incarnation. It's, the migration of the soul once the physical body dies, through the various different spiritual realms, and indeed back again if that soul is reincarnating. So that's enough introduction. I'll now go on to the divinatory meanings of the card, and then we'll go on to the more detailed aspects of it for those that want to look at this card in some detail. Looking at some upright divinatory meanings for the Empress, she can represent birth, pregnancy, fertility. She is indeed often seen pregnant, and her arm position here has relevance alchemically, but also it's the position of holding a child, a baby. She can also represent being in touch with the beauty of your life. So Venus is all about beauty. She can represent someone who needs nurturing, exploring our relationship with our mother, and she can also describe someone empathic and caring in their personality, in touch with universal love, and also reminding us that spirituality is expressed from the heart and not the head. Spending time with nature, we see in the Rider-Waite card here, she's very much surrounded by nature. And nurturing others and those around you as well as yourself. So these are some of the upright divinatory meanings that the Empress can represent in a reading. And obviously no card is taken on its own, so it would depend on the other cards in the reading as to what really would be relevant there. If the Empress is reversed, it can represent vanity, and I did speak about some of the trappings of the Empress at the beginning in the introduction. Sexual or emotional manipulation, unable to give or experience love, being damaged emotionally perhaps. This one here can also represent infidelity. Unresolved conflicts with one's mother, lack of self-love, unwanted pregnancy. So you can see how these do relate to the Empress really without going through a lot of the symbolism. Unable to connect with the universal love on your spiritual journey. Not enjoying your spiritual work at the moment, and conflicts. So the spiritual references are mainly to do with the information we'll get further in the video. Just quickly look at the Rider-Waite version here, and here is a quote from the Pictorial Guide to the Tarot by Waite, and he says she is the inferior Garden of Eden, the earthly paradise, all that is symbolised by the visible house of man. I think he calls her the inferior Garden of Eden, possibly because she is just the physical manifestation, whereas the Garden of Eden really is not a physical thing. So for those of people looking for the Garden of Eden on the earth physically, I wish you all the best, but does that in fact refer to spiritual realms? So she's that vehicle through which, or that doorway between spirit and matter that I'll go through pretty much in the rest of the video. This is a position of the Empress on the Tree of Life. She is in fact on the path between Binah and Hokmah, Binah being the receptive female and Hokmah being a masculine Sephiroth. This particular path is called the path of illuminating intelligence. So all of these paths here have a unique name. So this is the path of illuminating intelligence. So what does that mean? It means that light of creation, when we looked at the prism here, is contained within every form of the universe. It's that spiritual light. It's the light, personally, that I meditate on with our meditation group that I advertise on my website. So it's that spiritual light which illuminates form and gives it intelligence. So we have Binah, the universal female principle here, which receives the male force from Hokmah, and she nurtures this force in her womb, just as the Empress on the physical plane nurtures the infant or gives birth to the infant. And in a universal setting, from a universal and spiritual perspective, she delivers this transformed energy as it travels down the path of the Tree of Life. And this is what Crowley meant when he said that this is just a general figure which represents both the highest material and the lowest manifestations of love. She's slightly less well placed on the Tree of Life because she's unlike the Priestess. She's not in direct contact with Keter, so she's slightly less well placed than the Priestess. However, she does rule the very last path before the abyss, which I haven't put in here. I'll just place it in. So these three are representing the Holy Trinity. They are the purest of the Sephira on the Tree of Life, and she represents the last path before the energy crosses down into the lower parts of the Tree of Life. So that's what I was getting at when I referred to the Empress as being the doorway between spirit and matter. Again, that's oversimplified, but it gives you some idea of the role of the Empress. Being ruled by Venus, we can transpose the glyph of Venus on the Tree of Life, and as you can see, it very nicely unites all of the Sephira on the Tree of Life, and this uniting principle is symbolic of her universal love. So love at this level of the tree doesn't mean like projection and desire that can be experienced further down the tree, or even manifesting in the world. It's that universal love and intelligence that is within the spiritual light of creation. As I said, she does have a lower octave of expression when she manifests materially. So we'll now move on to her astrological and Hebrew attributions. So much of this I've gone through already. The Hebrew association with the Empress is the Hebrew letter Dalet, or it's even been pronounced Doleth. So I don't know which one is correct, but the meaning of this term is door, so this is the doorway. And one thing I probably didn't show you is the doorway is here. That I think is the white light of Keter, and you've got like an archway here at the top of the card here. So I have labelled this on the diagram. So there she sits. Her Venus symbolism I've already gone through, and that was really expressed in the divinatory meanings. So we'll move on to the next section, which is the symbolism. This is a picture of Isis, the goddess Isis, which is another expression of the Empress. We talked about the Empress representing Venus or Aphrodite, but in her more spiritual realms she represents Isis, and here we have the triple moon. And if we look at the Empress, we have this triple moon here, and in the middle we have an orb with a cross, and this is a particular cross which is called a Maltese cross. Now the orb and cross is symbolic of the catalyst in terms of alchemy, and a catalyst is something that essentially speeds up a reaction, and this is the chemical glyph of antimony. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later on, but as I said, she has a Maltese cross there, which is a specific form of cross rather than just the basic cross of antimony. So we're looking at the Maltese cross. The Maltese cross represents the 4 elements here. So what this is trying to get at in the figure is just the perfect balance of these elements that occurs when she is expressing her highest form. It's almost like because she's coming from a highest spiritual perspective, all of the elements are in balance. And there's a certain neutrality of the elements because the white light of Keter here doesn't really contain the elements themselves anymore. It's really just the potential of. And we notice that Keter on the Tree of Life is the Sephiroth of potential here at the top. And I said that the moon was important. She sits between, as well as having the headdress here of waxing and waning moons, she has on each side of her, she sits between the waxing moon here, which she faces, so it's getting bigger as the sun moves to the left here, and the waning moon here. So again, sun moving to the left, and it will eventually be blotted out. These two spiritually have different meanings, with the waxing moon is more associated with growth, fertility and love, which is essentially what the card represents. That's why she faces that moon. And the waning moon is more associated with letting go of things. Crowley also says that these moons are revolving. We see their sort of orbital things here, with the waning orbit being more predominant. So zooming out, it's interesting to note that the two touch here right in the centre of her torso, or more or less solar plexus area. And Crowley says that these revolving moons are symbolic of the balancing of opposites. So again, we have that balance that we saw in the Maltese cross. So yeah, it's ironic that these two orbits here actually cross in the solar plexus where she actually gives birth. So again, it's that perfect balance that comes from the expression of her higher self. Next up, we have other representations of her association with Venus, and these are the dove here and the sparrow. So a quote online from this I've actually put above, and it says, "In the vegetable kingdom, the myrtle, rose, apple and poppy, among others, were sacred to Aphrodite, which is associated with Venus, as in the animal world were the sparrow, dove, swan and swallow." So we have the sparrow and dove here, and we also have the rose down at the bottom here. It's very less obvious in this card than it is in the Rider-Waite card. You can easily see that she's sitting on a throne here, and you've got some water in the background here, nourishing all of nature. The same is actually happening in this card, it's just not quite so visible. These are twisted blue uprights of her throne where the sparrow and the dove sit. So she's on a throne here, but these are blue twisted uprights here. So it represents the fluidity of the feminine, but it does make it harder to pick out. Her dress is rose and green, also the colours of Venus. And she does have bees on her dress here. Zooming right in, we can see there's bees here, and they represent her energy and vitality. So we have things in like health shops like bee propolis, which is to do with invigoration of the immune system. Again, it's supposed to help with one's energy and vitality. So we have bees on her dress here, and more difficult to pick out, we have this spiral pattern with a domino in the center here. The spiral pattern is like the spiral nature of the universe. You get spiral galaxies, and domino, the black and white, is duality. So it's like duality contained within universality, and another symbolic representation of the fact that she represents the whole and combines the whole with love. Even at a zoomed up level, we can't really see the pattern on her girdle here, but it is supposed to contain the different glyphs of the zodiac. And similar to the last point about spiral galaxies and the duality, the zodiac pattern on it means that she unites all the different aspects of the zodiac. The zodiac representing the 12 labors of Hercules. So it's this love that unites everything. She also holds the blue lotus of Isis in her right hand, held over the heart chakra. Another symbol of universal love, expressed through the wellspring of the heart. This is why I said in the divinatory meanings that the spiritual path is more of the heart and not of the head. And the blue colour is a symbol of water, which is her element, again representing fertility and creativity. The lotus itself has 4 petals, as we can see showing, representing the Sephiroth Hesed, which is indicating like a manifestation of love from the divine into matter. So looking at the tree of life, this is the next Sephirothon from Binar. So it's that energy then crossing the abyss to be more involved in the physical universe, even though Hesed wasn't strictly physical, but it's the beginning of structure in the universe. Instead of arms were curved as if holding a baby. So if we look at pictures of Isis here, she's holding the babe Horus, and in Thalemia this is a ritual gesture of magic where we have Isis rejoicing, or Mater Triumphans. With the head looking downwards, the right hand pinches the left nipple, while the left hand cradles just below the solar plexus as if holding a baby. So that is similar to the Empress here. We now move on to the bottom section of the card, and there's an awful lot going on here. I'll just start by this white rose here that I mentioned, which is a symbol of Venus. The whiteness is also symbolic of the purity of the energy that the Empress expresses, and you've got like a green river here, again green with Venus. Now you do have, if you count this one here, which looks like a fish, so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fish, and this could well represent that manifestation in Malkut on the tree of life. So it's that universal energy going out into matter and being expressed. Now I've never seen that anywhere at all in terms of counting fish. They're usually just these two here that are mentioned, but all of these things are here for a reason. So as I say, I haven't seen that in any book. It's just something that I've noticed doing this video right now. We have this figure here, which is the fleur-de-lis. French is a little better than my Hebrew. It's worth just going through this particular symbolism. It really relates back to the 12th century when a French monarch used this symbol on his shield, and English kings later used the symbol on their coats of arms to emphasise their claims to the throne of France. We can break this word down and look at its components. So fleur is flower, lys, or L-Y-S as it's sometimes spelt, is lily. Now, lily is also known as the May birth flower. So in the language of flowers, this May birth flower represents like the purity, majesty, and honour. And the lily is composed of 3 petals, which are secured around the base, with the 3 indicating, if we go back to our tree of life here, the Sephiroth Binah. So I think looking at the history of the fleur-de-lis, I think they're here because essentially we are looking at a lady on a throne, and she's like a monarch, but not in the conventional sense, not in like a worldly sense like the Queen sitting on a throne with a crown of jewels, which is basically just materialism. She's actually got her spiritual crown, and so I think that is just a representation of her strength of purpose and, you know, the place that she holds on the tree of life. So that completes the section on symbolism. The rest of the symbolism that I'm going to talk about will be related to alchemy, which I said was quite an important part, which is why I've left it until the end. Crowley relates the Empress here to the alchemical substance of salt. We can see that this circular glyph of salt is similar to her position in terms of her arms here. This circular nature. Sulphur is this glyph of a triangle surmounted on a cross, and if we go back to the original picture of the Emperor here, we've got this triangular pose that he has with his legs. So the Emperor is representing sulphur, the Empress is salt, and I said that the catalyst was this antimony here with the orb and the cross. These are also linked in the Book of Thoth with the 3 gunas, which is a Hindu philosophy, with the rajas here. These are just modes of existence, the gunas. So with the rajas, you've got creative, it's action, it's passion. With salt, you've got more inaction. And the sattvas here, this represents purity and harmony. And these are the 3 gunas. And that ties in with the Tree of Life, where you've got the force of Hokmah here going into Binah. So Binah is just waiting for that force so she can actually start the process of creation of the universe from the womb of Binah. So the main features of the lower card are the shield here and the pelican. These are the 2 things that stand out above the detail. So I've just drawn this diagram here where we've got this alchemical process going on. Now alchemy is obviously the turning of base metals into gold, but ultimately from a spiritual viewpoint it's about turning the soul and purifying it into so it transcends the creation to find the purity of God. And this is represented alchemically here. We've got the pelican, which is representing the dross bit, and the shield representing the pure bit. So that's as we shed our attachments to the world and to who we think we are, we move into a state of spiritual purity. And this also relates to the 3 eons which I mentioned in the previous video, which is why I wanted to do the eon video first, because the pelican is unique in that, well, traditionally it was thought in medieval times that it feeds its young with the blood from its own heart, and therefore it's representing an eon, an old eon of where religion looked at sacrificial things in order to get to God, such as the crucifixion of Christ, which is representing a spiritual process. We don't know I don't know personally whether that happened physically or not, but it is a spiritual process. It's like an inner crucifixion of the 5 senses, and I go through that a lot in the Mystic Bible section on my website. So this is like an old eon here, and the new eon is the purified white tincture, and this is the eon of Horus, of alchemy, and it's about getting to grips with purifying the soul through spiritual practice rather than just base religion and tradition. And antimony is the catalyst that does that distinction between the pelican and the shield. So we can see really that the antimony ultimately represents spiritual practice. That is the catalyst. It doesn't happen without spiritual practice, whether it be meditation or whatever practice you do. So again, that's something that has just occurred to me in this video. I haven't seen that in any particular book. Final bit on symbolism here. This is the Emperor's shield and this is the Empress's shield. We have a double-headed eagle in both and the fleur-de-lis in both. So just looking at the Empress in this video, in the beaks of the eagle we have, I don't think I can expand that anymore without really blurring the image, but we have a waxing moon, which is the same as here. So this is contained within the double beaks of the eagle. The white tincture is symbolic really of the sexual fluids of the female, the lubrication, ejaculation. And because the white eagle is the representing part of the Empress, we have the association with the Emperor here, which has the red tincture, which I'll go through when I do the Emperor. So that's it with the alchemy. So it's the purification of the soul through spiritual practice. Really, that's what it comes down to. So symbolism is over. I'll go on to a brief section next, which is the transition between the Priestess and the Empress. So this is a short section on the transition that's made between the Priestess and the Empress. So the Priestess represents our alignment with our soul's purpose, which I talked about in the previous video. She represents us living our daily life ruled around attaining our spiritual purpose rather than our material living. But when the fool encounters the Empress, he's taken a big step because he's now in greater recognition of what the essential nature of that spirit is, which is love, which is talked about in this card a lot. And that's much purer than personal love. So at this stage the fool may only have a glimpse of this quality and he still does not know his true identity, but nevertheless it's another powerful realization to have. So that sums up that transition. We'll now go on to the final section, which is the application of the Empress in various positions of the Celtic cross. So this is our Celtic cross spread here, and we'll just move the Empress here to the first position. So if the Empress is the first card that appears on a spread, it could be that, well, that's a dominant energy or direction of the spread, and essentially the heart of the situation is being in touch with what fulfills you and the beauty of life, because she represents Venus, and being in touch with what fulfills you is all about rising above the mundane. It's even if you're not doing any direct spiritual path, it's trying to find something that you feel in love with, that will bring you to a higher sense of love and achievement and acceptance of yourself. Number 2, possible obstacles. So when the Empress crosses, this is effectively the current challenge affecting your issue, and the opposite to the first one is sort of out of touch with what fulfills you, out of touch with your spirituality. Other possible meanings in this position could be, like, for instance, the couple could be at odds with having children. That could be another aspect that the Empress could represent. The Empress in position 3, subconscious or unconscious influences, negative thought patterns that could be holding you back from nurturing yourself properly and others. Unconscious influences tend to be things that are unresolved. Recent past affecting or influencing the situation. If reversed, it could be issues around your mother or accepting love from others. Maybe we find it difficult to do that. Feeling unloved, or even a loveless marriage or relationship. And really, I should put this here in reverse for that. But by the same token, if that is upright, it could mean a period in time where you've got in touch with this spirituality and you've found this universal love, and you can use that to move forward into your current position. So all of these are just examples. So moving the Empress to position number 5 now, hopes and goals. To feel more loved and supported personally, and to be able to open your heart spiritually, and to unlock the doorway between your life and the what is the essence of spirituality, going back to that prism analogy. Short-term future. So in position number 6 here at the top, this is where it is on the Celtic cross. Could mean the birth of a child, but it might not be a physical birth. It might be the start of something new, so it's the birth of something, but its connection is with the heart and not the head. So that is something which is connecting to your sort of inner self, where that spiritual path connects, rather than it being an intellectual thing. It's something that's going to be very close to your heart's desires. But again, the Empress is all about trying to find your highest purpose. Card in position 7, how we are affecting our situation or our self-image. It could mean that we need to be empathic, caring, compassionate and loving, and that might be a description of our nature, or more likely, if it's nailed down with the other cards in the spread, it could be that you need to demonstrate those qualities in the situation at hand, whether it be in the work environment, in your personal life, Or another situation here, again relates to love and children, that theme. So we'll move on to position 8. Position 8 is our environment, how others are affecting our situation or our external environment. And it could be that our partner is loving and supports us, and that this or a particular person with those qualities are instrumental in supporting us in our life at this time. Again, it could relate to work or a spiritual path or our personal life. But those qualities are being coming to us from our world rather than them being expressed through ourself. Next we have the Empress in position number 9, which is guidance and warning. This relates to, or can relate to, our meditation and spiritual practice. It must be nurturing to us. So it's looking at it from a different point of view. If we're not feeling that love from our spiritual practice, then with love being the key, which is a theme that runs through this particular video, then it could be the reason that is holding you back. So it's getting in touch with following the spiritual path through the heart. And lastly, we have the Empress in position number 10, which is the long-term or overall outcome, and that is being at one with this universal love, finding that connection of love as part and parcel of the spiritual path. It's something, that I've come across in meditation and seen within this light of creation that binds everything together. So hopefully that helps. Again, with the divination section here, these are just examples, just starting points for you to then go on and use to your own discretion. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks ever so much for watching. Your support is greatly appreciated, and I'll see you for the next card. I'm not sure whether it's a minor or major arcana next.